Good morning and welcome to another alternate media live stream. For those of you who are stateside, happy Memorial Day. While you're doing your barbecues, try and remember what today is all about for us here in America. Without further ado, let me bring up my co-host for today, my brother Jeremy. How are you this morning, sir?
I'm well. How are you?
I am doing well. We are being joined today by a guest. Our friend Isaac will be joining us by phone today. Isaac, how are you this morning, sir?
Doing great. And today is Memorial Day, but it's also Yom Yerushalayim, Jerusalem Day. A big miracle happened, in 1967, Six-Day War, and the Jerusalem became reunited with her people, and it's an incredible miracle.
Amen. Amen. Yeah, a truly incredible miracle. It's amazing. That actually has come up in discussion this week for me more often than I think it ever has. Just because of the current conflict and everything. I've had to explain to some pro-Palestinian people that I've run into the history of how all this came about and go through the 6-Day War and just explain that, like, look, that they rightfully have possession of the land, right? This is their home. It belongs to them.
Yeah.
Today we are going to be going over a video from Rabbi Morty. Now, I follow Rabbi Morty on TikTok. I enjoy his content a lot, actually. This one in particular came up where he voiced a few objections to Yeshua, and I thought it would make for interesting conversation for us all. So I'll bring the video up, and we'll kind of do this really, I guess, undisciplined. If at any point there is something you want to address that he says, just tell me to pause the video. Does that work?
Yeah.
All right.
Sounds good.
Let me pull this up and bring the video back here.
My Messianic friends, and especially to hello, Ms. Rachel. Where did you hear that I don't practice Torah anymore? It's literally what my family is doing, raising our kids. Great. Follow the Torah. Just leave Jesus alone. It's very dangerous what you're doing. Very dangerous. And I'll tell you why. Number one is he's totally against the Torah. So you think that you're smarter than 2,000 years of Jews who have rejected him and have thrived without him. We have thrived because we're still around. The Torah that you are practicing has been at the cost of others believing in him. He has the heritage of evil toward the Jews, pogroms, inquisitions, Holocaust, expulsions, forced conversions, all in his name. And you're believing someone who all that was done in his name. It's not possible for Mashiach to be a purveyor, a bringer of peace, if that was all done in his name. Not possible. And you are spitting in the face of all the Jews who have suffered over the years. The New Testament, even if you don't believe in it, that's really where the heritage of him comes from, and it completely contradicts the Torah in many, many ways. You don't believe in the virgin birth? Well, if you do believe in the virgin birth, obviously it can't be from the Davidic line. And if you don't believe in the virgin birth, why not? That's what his believers believe. You don't believe that he's God, and you don't believe in the Trinity? Why not? That's what his believers believe. And even if you don't believe in that, you just believe.
All right.
Hey, yeah, maybe you can help summarize some of the points he made, and
so
maybe respond to a few of those. Yeah,
absolutely. Essentially, he explains that 2,000 years of Judaism has rejected Yeshua, and that essentially that Yeshua is responsible for the vast persecution of the Jewish people throughout history. Particularly, he mentions the pogroms of the medieval period, the Holocaust, and then he starts to bring up a few objections. One of them being the virgin birth, because he can't be of a Davidic line if the virgin birth is true, and then also that if you reject the virgin birth, then you're rejecting what his followers accepted. And then he says the same thing of Christology. He says if you don't believe that he was God, then you're still rejecting what his followers accepted. So he's kind of go for it.
No, I didn't mean to cut you off.
It seems like he's drawing like a if you accept these things about him, then you're not in line with Judaism. But if you reject those things, then you're not in line with Yeshua.
Which is like a false dichotomy, right?
Well, it's a false dichotomy, and it's kind of a bandwagon fallacy, because you're saying, well, just because everyone believes that, you have to believe that to agree that he is who he says he is. Well, you don't. Look at Christianity today, how divided it is on any number of issues. There is no consensus on hundreds of issues within the church. So why do these things have to be now? Sure, you can't agree or disagree with the Trinity and be considered an Orthodox Christian, right? Or under maybe a fundamentalist. Right. There are different sects that have to hold certain things. But even today, the Unitarian Church, the Oneness Pentecostals, like take out Torah observance, take out the Messianic groups, even just mainline Christianity, there are multiple groups of Unitarianism. So it's a false representation, I guess, kind of a straw man.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, and
another thing he brought up was just that he made the claim that he can't be the Messiah and also be the reason for that kind of persecution of the Jewish people, was essentially the point that he brought up first.
Yeah, it's a very good point. I mean, it's very contrary to the expectation of what the Messiah would be, and the the response would be that instead of spitting in the face, as he said, it's spitting in the face, right? I would say it's actually, we're crying, we're weeping that he was so misinterpreted and misused and misappropriated to be a justification for violence and the persecution and the horrible evils that were done in his name, which were clearly not what he intended or what he wanted, what he would have ever wanted as being himself a Jewish rabbi, for example. So the fact that his name could be so abused and so misused is a tragedy, is a horrible atrocity. It's not just an atrocity, but so it's an atrocity to the Jewish people, but it's also an atrocity to him and to what he stood for and what he taught and what he represented. And so I think that that's a very important point to bring up to him. Now, as far as the idea of how could God allow that to happen? I think that's the point, is that we have to see that God allowed it to happen in the first place, that it's not like it happened apart from God's will or apart from God's knowledge of what would happen, even though we say that it clearly does not represent what he taught and what he represented. So we have to. It's a lot to unpack as far as why would God allow someone so righteous as we believe he was, and so upright in his teachings and his morality and his clarity of what he believed and stood for. Why would God allow that person to be so horribly misrepresented and to the point of persecuting God's people, the Jewish people? And that's obviously a lot to unpack. So it's easy to dismiss it like he does. He just dismisses and he just says, and I don't blame him for this, because I think his hurt, there's a hurt that he has, and it's totally justified. There's a pain, there's a wanting to put responsibility on Yeshua for the murder and the massacre and the genocide, all the genocide and all of that. And it's understandable that from that pain he wants to find who's responsible, and it's easiest to just put that on the one who they claim to represent and they claim to name. But when we actually look at in the final analysis, when we look at it objectively, we try to remove the emotion and the hurt, and we analyze what he taught and what he represented, then we can't. It's actually an injustice to him to blame him for that.
Yeah.
And I do think it is worth pointing out for everybody watching that his, the hurt that you're describing comes from a reality, right? The Jewish people have been persecuted by Christianity. And so these critiques are a valid criticism of Christianity. It is a valid criticism of Christianity's history, but it's not necessarily fair to inherently tie that to Yeshua. Right, or at least not the Yeshua that we know of. This is a result of a misinterpreted and misunderstood Yeshua. This is the result of Jesus versus Yeshua, so to speak.
Yeah, and what I try to remind myself and remind others is that for most of human history, people, Christians, were not literate enough to even read the Bible for themselves, or to know for themselves what Yeshua taught and what the Bible taught. And they relied on the clergy and the leaders. And for most of Christian history, it was Roman Catholicism. Until the Protestant Reformation, there was also Greek Orthodox. So you have Greek Orthodox and Roman Catholicism. They split, about 1,000 years ago. But you don't have Protestant Christianity until about 500 years ago. So
Right.
for about 3/4 of Christian history, you have and you don't have literacy or the ability to even print books until around that time. That's actually what led to the Protestant Reformation, is that people started to become more literate. They started to actually read and understand what the Bible actually says, and they said, this cannot be Roman Catholicism or Greek Orthodoxy or whatever. It was mainly Roman Catholicism that they were revolting against.
Mm-hmm.
But they immediately recognized that there was a clear gap between what the Bible teaches, what Yeshua taught, and what Roman Catholicism taught.
Yes.
So we also have to make and this is what we call in Judaism Havdalah, a separation. We have to make a separation between that very long history of Christianity, which, it's like people use the word Christianity, but it's like, what are you talking about? What is Christianity to you?
Yeah.
Is it Roman Catholicism or is it evangelical Protestantism? There's even 40,000 denominations after that, right? So there's so many different interpretations of what the Bible teaches, and what the New Testament teaches, especially. But you only have. But as soon as you have that separation, you also see a massive decline, I believe, in persecution of the Jewish people. You see actually the reverse effect that happens after the Protestant Reformation. You see a love of the Hebraist Christians, the Hebraicists, the ones who started to study Hebrew, started to study Talmud, started to study the Jewish texts, and they promoted the study of these this language, Hebrew, and the study of these texts. And you over the development of history, you have the Christian Zionist movement that starts, for example. You have Lord Balfour, who aided tremendously in even the establishment of the state of Israel. And you also have more recently, you have the Messianic, movement. You have the Torah, Hebrew roots movement, and that's not because of a ignorance of the Bible, but that's because of a continued and further progression of education about what the Bible actually teaches. And people are more educated. So Christians are becoming more Jewish loving, more Israel loving. And it's the old guard, it's the Roman Catholics and the Candace Owens, right? Think about some of the big names right now are actually members of the Catholic Church, the people who are the most anti-Semitic seeming, or they're part of one of those older denominations that are more replacement theology, and I would say less biblically aligned. So anyways, it's a lot of history, but it's very important to understand the development and to make a separation between understand that what came out, how the development of the Catholic Church, how that happened is a separation from Yeshua. There was already a separation from Yeshua and what he taught, and we weren't able to make that separation again until people became more educated. And that's also partly because we didn't listen to Jewish people to tell us how to interpret and understand the scriptures. We claimed to replace them, and we persecuted them, and we murdered them, right? That's what happened in Christian history. So we didn't understand the scriptures because we didn't listen to those who did understand it. And most people just weren't even able to understand it, even if they wanted to. So
right. And it's fascinating you bring up, just the fact of literacy alone. Almost immediately in Christian history began the steps in that direction, because now Martin Luther is credited as being, one of the first to translate the Bible into the common man's language. And one of the first things that we see happen in German history at that point is Torah observance. It's interesting that Torah observance is actually one of the most natural conclusions to reading the Bible without anybody telling you what it means, just interpreting it for yourself. Torah observance is one of the most natural conclusions. And so that's what the German people started doing. And then Martin Luther persecuted them for it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing that we have to recognize in our separating the man-made religion from what the Bible teaches. We have to recognize that the Reformation did not go far enough to separate from the Roman Catholicism and the replacement theology and all the doctrines that were foreign to Judaism that were added later by Gentiles to the Jewish following and the Jewish texts of the New Testament. So that all came in later, and so a lot of the Reformation is actually a very proper name for what happened, because a lot of those doctrines were just reformed. They were just kind of repositioned. It was kept, but it was molded in a different way. That replacement theology stayed. The Trinitarianism stayed. The antinomianism stayed, So all of those really important doctrinal things that are clearly contradicting Judaism and clearly contradicting what Yeshua would have taught as a rabbi, as a Pharisee, right? Paul as a Pharisee. Those things clearly go against what the New Testament teaches, and Judaism, right? So instead of saying, okay, sorry, this is not biblical, we're not going to go follow this anymore, we're not going to hold these doctrines anymore, it was just reformed. It was just, it's not the Catholic Church, it's the Lutheran Church. It's not the Catholic traditions, it's the Lutheran traditions. It's not it just reformed everything. And what's worse about that is that now there's an arrogance, because there's a feeling of, oh, now we got the truth. We left Catholicism,
Yeah.
so now we've arrived. Now we're sola scriptura. Now we can understand the Bible. We only follow the Bible, without an understanding that, well, you have to have an interpretation of the Bible, and you have to understand the Bible in its original context. And the original context was Jewish, by the way. So there's
Right.
an arrogance, a continued arrogance, and a continued replacement theology that is not separating the man-made religion and man-made doctrines from the biblical truth.
Right. And now regarding his objections, specifically of whether or not you do or don't believe in the virgin birth, or you do or don't believe that he's God, you did mention that is a false dichotomy. Was there any more detail you wanted to go into on those in particular, or?
Well, I mean, the virgin birth is a good example, because there are places when you put the New Testament back in its first century Jewish context, there are sources in Judaism, and especially first century Judaism, which talk about virgin birth. So Philo of Alexandria is a great example, because he's the one who says, and many scholars, I think, agree that the New Testament, if not exactly borrowing from Philo, it uses a lot of the similar language as Philo, about the Logos, for example, the word of God. That's
Right.
like one big clear example. But Philo also talks about how the forefathers, the Avot, Avraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov, they were all born of a virgin birth. This is what he writes, and I think it's in his section on dreams. But that's one example. The Talmud talks about the possibility of a virgin becoming pregnant. The story of, I'm just trying to think of a few examples here. There's a story about Melchizedek, that he was born through virgin conception. So, and that story is what's it called? A pseudepigraphal story, but it dates around
Right.
the same time as the New Testament. I think it's a little later, but anyways, it's a Jewish text. So these are all Jewish sources that talk about righteous men, not gods, right? Not God coming to the earth and incarnating in human flesh, right? They're talking about righteous men who were conceived and born of virgins. So this is within the milieu of Judaism at the time. And there's even in the Zohar, it even talks about how Queen Esther, she did not actually have relations with Achashverosh, right? But we know that she also had a child with him, Daryavesh. So how could that have happened unless it was also a virgin type of conception? That I haven't heard anyone else share that idea, but that's an idea I've thought of. So there's just many different ways to look at this. So.
Right, and there's also even, if I understand it correctly, like the concept of the halakhic virgin, right? Where the Talmud goes into many details, about what qualifies as a virgin, and there are some in which there was like a partial consummation that took place, but not enough to disqualify her virginity, and so it's it's even possible that
Right.
that such could be the case in the in the conception of Yeshua.
Oh, I'll say this too. Yeah. So it could be, I mean, I do think the story makes it clear that Joseph was kind of shocked by the what happened, and so I do think there wasn't an act. I do think it was a miraculous thing that happened. And I'll give another example. It says with Jacob's sheep that in Jewish tradition, it says that some of the sheep became pregnant through the seed of the male sheep, but they did not have intimacy. Now another couple points I'll make on the virgin birth, just as an example. Oh man, I lost my thought. We were talking about.
Well, I had mentioned the halakhic virgin.
Yes.
And
I was thinking of another example. Oh, okay. Well, I was just going to say this, that the the whole point of the so when Philo talks about the virgin birth of the righteous, and he includes Moses' son as well, or both of his sons. I can't remember, but basically he says that when it says that Adam knew Eve, it says Adam knew Eve, and then they had a child, right?
Right.
But it doesn't say that about the righteous forefathers. It doesn't say that the man knew his wife and then they gave birth. It says, actually, what it says is that they, like in the example of Rivka, it says that they prayed for a child, and then it says God opened her womb. Like God did a miracle, and that's the whole point of Abraham and Sarah being able to have a child. It was not supposed to be physically possible for them.
Right.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, it was a miracle that they had a child in their old age, right? And the point with Rachel as well. Rachel had a child. She was not able to have children, but when they prayed for a child, that's when it says God opened up their womb, or God gave them a child. It wasn't through an act of intimacy, and it doesn't talk about an act of intimacy. So what Philo derives from this is that God did these births were miraculous, and these were righteous men who were born from miraculous births. And so the understanding of the Messiah was that if the Messiah is supposed to be a greater righteous man and on a greater level than even Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and their births were miraculous, then that means that the Messiah's birth also has to be miraculous. So that's literally the context of.
It's also really interesting because Luke, in the narrative of John the Baptist's birth, does not say that Zechariah knew Elizabeth. It just says he kept making signs to them and remained speechless. When the days of his ministry were completed, he went back home. After these days, his wife Elizabeth conceived and kept herself in seclusion for 5 months.
Yeah, so that could be an example. It's a little less. Is there a verse that talks about them praying, not being able to have a child, and praying for a child? I'm trying to remember.
Doesn't specifically, I don't think, say pray. He was ministering in the temple, and they were old and unable to conceive, and so that the whole story is.
So it does.
He's ministering, and Gabriel brings him a message saying, "Your wife will conceive," and he goes, "Well, how is this possible? We're both old," and he's cursed to be dumb until the child is named.
Yes, very nice. Yeah, that's a good example. And John was clearly a righteous, person. One of the greatest, according to Yeshua, right? That he said that he was one of the greatest people who ever lived. So yeah, that would fit the context and show that it's not just something unique to Yeshua. He wasn't the only one in Judaism or in the New Testament, even if what you're saying is accurate. He's not the only one who had a birth that was miraculous. Yeah. And so the aspect of a virgin birth is not something that is absolutely unheard of in Judaism. There's actually many sources and very diverse sources: Talmud, Zohar, Philo, and the book about Melchizedek. So those are all very diverse books that talk about a virgin birth.
Now, what would your response be to the objection that a virgin birth prevents him from being of the seed of David?
Sorry, say that again.
What would your response be to the objection that being born of a virgin disqualifies him from David's lineage?
Right. So in a few places, the New Testament makes it very clear that he was of the seed of David, and he was a son of Joseph. So I do believe, I know, Ariel Cohen-Aloro, for example, maybe. Well, actually, I spoke with him about this too, and he said he's willing to accept that idea, which I think is the accurate idea.
Oh,
I think we might have lost him. Oh, hold on.
so I may have missed because I was
he
checking
is.
a message.
Did you lose me?
Oh, there you are.
Yeah, I lost you for a moment.
The idea, just for clarification, the idea you're referring to is that it is still the seed of Joseph, but miraculously implanted. Is that the idea?
Yes, from the sheep of Jacob.
Yeah.
Wait, no, we lost him again. Hang on. It says device not connected. Uh-oh. Hang on, folks. We're having just a little bit of technical difficulty, but we're trying to get our guest back up. Because I definitely liked where I love where he was going with that, because that's for me, I don't necessarily have a settled position on the subject of the virgin birth. I am more skeptical of it given the history of the accounts. But if I were to affirm it, it would be under the conditions that he's essentially just laid out, which is that it's Joseph's seed still miraculously taken from Joseph and implanted into Mary, which a lot of people have objection to. And it's like, but that's still a miraculous birth, and that's still a miraculous conception.
And it's technically still a virgin birth. The objections that people bring to that typically are from the vantage point of accepting original sin. Yeah.
Right. The idea is that if he comes from a man's seed, a living human being, male seed, then somehow he inherits a sin nature.
Correct. So Idol Killer loves to call this sinful semen, right? It's the idea that because Adam sinned, and by one man sin entered the world, and death passed upon all men, well, therefore we are guilty of Adam's sin. Every man is born totally depraved. And therefore it is, and this is why it had to be, he could have a human mother, but not a human father, right? And even then they have to expand it too, because she's like the Ark of the Covenant or whatever. Well, Mary had to have a special grace. It's like, okay, but if God could give Mary a special grace, why couldn't he give everyone a special grace? Like the logic just doesn't follow on a lot of these arguments. It stems exactly from what you said, and it flows. That's why they say you can't have, or you have to have a non-human father, but that causes other potential issues.
Right. And to that point, just the entire understanding of what the sin nature is becomes a little problematic, just in that it's funny. I had a discussion about this the other day in the Church Split Apologetics chat group, actually. And the reason this becomes problematic is like not understanding in a Jewish context. And I would actually, it would just be awesome to have Isaac up here for this. What a sin nature is, right?
Yeah.
What the New Testament authors are really referring to, because for anybody who has studied Tanya, and I'm sure Zohar goes more in depth about this, it's talking about the nefesh, right? The animal soul. It's specifically it's talking about the Yetzer Hara, which uses the nefesh as the vehicle through which it achieves its goals.
Yep.
So the Yetzer Hara is the evil inclination. It is part of the human condition. It's part of being human, right? So you can't really say that he was fully human, but he didn't have a sin nature. What you're doing is you're actually separating what makes him human from him at that point.
So three actual things here. One, Hebrews 2:17 says, therefore, he had to be like his brothers in every way so that he could become a merciful and faithful high priest in service to God to make propitiation for the sins of the people. For since he himself was tested and has suffered, he is able to help those who are tested. That basically saying he had to have a sin nature. He had to be able to be tempted. And then I don't remember which church father it is, but one of the church fathers actually said that which he did not become, he did not redeem or did not restore. So if he didn't have the totally depraved nature that every man has, he couldn't redeem or restore it.
Right.
Which brings us to the third point of the Yetzer Hara. I have an article that it's still under review process on the uncircumcised heart, right? Because that's not a new, everyone loves to think, oh, Paul talked about the uncircumcised heart and we need to be circumcised in our heart. That's an Old Testament concept, and it's found in multiple places in the Old Testament. And the beauty of the fact that it's in the Tanakh is the fact that now there's commentary on it, right? Well, the uncircumcised heart, according to the rabbis, is the Yetzer Hara.
Right.
So he had to have the ability to circumcise an uncircumcised heart within himself, to conquer sin, to overcome it. And you don't get that if you don't have, if you're not human.
Yep. And looks like we got our guest back. Isaac, you there? His mic is turned off.
It's all right. I did what Baptist preachers do best, pontificated on little things.
Are you there, my friend? Mic's still turned off. Okay.
And we should be getting another surprise guest here any time.
I think here he is. Hey, it's our producer.
The comic relief has arrived.
All right. Yeah, Isaac, we were just commenting on the whole idea of Yeshua still being from the seed of Joseph, just miraculously planted into Mary's womb. Oh, we lost him.
For those who aren't aware, he is overseas, so connection is a little tricky. That's why we're streaming so early in the day, as well as time differences.
Yep. So yeah, we were just discussing, some of the objections to him from the Christian side, to him being from Joseph's seed, would be like the idea that it would mean that he has what the Christians call a sin nature, which in their comprehension of Messiah, the Messiah can't have. They really believe that he can't be the Messiah and have a sin nature, which I would equate to just the presence of the Yetzer Hara. What are your thoughts on that? You there?
Is he still muted?
He might still be muted. Oh, well. Feel free to cut in at any time. What I may do... Oh, looks like he unmuted. Are you there? Nope.
This is like the old, is it Sprint or Verizon? Can you hear me now?
Right?
Can you hear me now?
Well, it's like he's muting and unmuting, So I feel like he's trying to work out his audio here.
He's working out his own salvation with fear and trembling.
Austin, how are you doing this morning?
I'm doing good. I think that there's also an importance with the definitions, right? Like, it's something that Greek theology loves to throw away or redefine. Basically, like, you just fill it with so many words that eventually it doesn't mean anything. You just kind of go in circles. But that's kind of like the Greek philosophy way of explaining things. I'll confuse you with words that kind of go in. It's just one thing after the next, but it's all circular logic. And so if you're talking about what is an evil inclination, what are the properties of an evil inclination, then what are they? Okay, you have the ability to be tempted, right? Like, even from a Catholic viewpoint, it's like, what is original sin? It's not necessarily in many Orthodox circles on the Christian side. Like, original sin doesn't mean that you actually inherit sin itself. Yeah. You inherit the ability to sin. And so what does that look like? Okay, well, inheriting the ability to sin means that you actually inherit the evil inclination, which is what allows you to be tempted. You can't be tempted without the evil inclination. And so to say that Jesus didn't have an evil inclination, once again, nullifies the scripture that says that Jesus was tempted. Not only tempted, he like in the wilderness, but he's also tempted in every way that we are tempted. So if you're tempted in every single way that we are tempted, then how can you say that you didn't inherit a sinful or a Yetzer Hara or the fleshly thing? And then it'll be, oh, well, that was his human side that was tempted.
Well, and I also think there's this unspoken back thought. I don't know what the right term would be, but that, well, someone tempting you, like he experienced a temptation, someone tried, but he didn't actually have any desire to give in. That also goes against him conquering himself, the sin nature, right? What he had to redeem. He was tempted to eat the bread. Okay, not right. Just by Satan. He desired to eat the bread.
He felt hunger.
He felt hunger. He overcame that, and that's the point, right? So that it's not just, well, see, I can tempt Austin to do something, but Austin may have no desire for it. Okay.
But then that's not even temptation. Like a great example
that's what I'm trying to say. Yeah.
Is like, I use the bucket of boiling mayonnaise as kind of my go-to. Like, if I set a bucket of boiling mayonnaise in front of you and I'm like, hey, what do you think? Are you tempted to eat it? Have I tempted you in any way? No, it doesn't matter what I say. Unless you're some sort of psychopath, you're not going to grab a spoon or a straw and just be like, oh, yeah, let me go to town on this. It's not going to happen, right? Because you're not tempted. There has to be even if there's a tiny little piece of you that has it, because temptation requires desire and it requires opportunity. Without opportunity or desire, you can't actually, there is no such thing as temptation.
Yeah.
And so if I were to put a boiling vat of mayonnaise in front of you and hand you a straw, you have every opportunity, but I haven't tempted you because these things just exist. Opportunity exists, desire doesn't exist. So when Jesus is tempted and it's like he's hungry, he has the ability to turn something into bread. There is a desire, there is an opportunity. Now we have the components necessary for temptation to work together. Yeah. This is one of the issues with the Greek philosophy on it is, it's like the he's tempted, like people are trying to tempt him into something and he has no desire for it. Well, then that's not actually temptation. That's not even a third party temptation.
Yep. I love it.
Isaac, you with us? I feel like there may be some audio trouble there. I wonder if he can even hear us.
Here, I'll put it in the Discord. I might be able to help walk him through it.
Yeah. See if there might be. Okay, so he can hear us. He just messaged. Okay, so it's just a matter of figuring out his microphone. Might be a StreamYard settings issue. I know he's working on the app. Oh.
I had that happen as soon as I joined in. Usually I have it set for my microphone here. So I was talking and everyone was just like talking right over. I was like,
Can you hear me now?
Can no one hear me?
Yes.
Yep,
There we
it is.
go.
Oh man, my Bluetooth stopped working for some.
That's all right.
Still nothing?
No,
Nope, we
I
got
got you loud and clear.
Oh yeah.
Yep.
Okay,
So-
I really want to get my headphones working. Let me just try this real quick.
Sure.
Okay, well, I guess that's not going to work. So, can you hear me?
Yes,
Yep.
we can.
Yep. I
Okay,
can hear
sorry
you.
about that. I'll just go the old-fashioned way without Bluetooth for whatever reason.
What we were just discussing. Well, I think you probably heard me before. Maybe.
Yeah, I actually heard you guys.
Yeah. So, floor's
It was
open.
the
Just
frustration
speak
of
your thoughts on what
you.
we just said.
Ooh, that's your dad, right?
I think so. Uh-oh, we might have lost him again. There we go. We all good? Uh-oh. I know he really wants to get his earpiece working.
How about now?
All good. Yeah, loud and clear.
Okay, let's try this now. I'm just trying to find better service, I think, is my issue.
I gotcha. So, yeah.
Okay, so
thoughts
in
on
Judaism, the Messiah, is we say that the Messiah represents the level of the soul of the Yechidah, and the Yechidah is the highest level of the soul. There's 5 levels of the soul, and the Yechidah is the level of the soul that did not participate in the sin of eating of the fruit of the tree. And so this level of the soul actually flew away from Adam when he sinned. And so Yechidah is the root is has to do with unity. Yachid. And it represents unity with God. And so the highest level of soul is the closest to God. It's unity with God. It represents unity with God. And so that unity and that level of the soul, which Judaism says is the level of the Messiah, the Mashiach, is sinless and does not commit sin.
Right.
Now, that doesn't mean that he didn't have the potential to sin, but it means that he was on such a high level that he did not sin.
Right. Yeah. I think that's where a lot of like especially Christians of the modern era get confused. It's like they marry in their minds the idea of the Yetzer Hara being present, right? The idea that you can be tempted. They marry that to being in what they would say being in sin, right? Or to committing sin.
Yeah.
And it's not a sin to be tempted. It's that's what makes you human. It's one of the fundamental things that makes you human. but giving into that and committing a sin is different from experiencing the temptation. And I think we would all here agree that yeah, Messiah, did not sin.
Yeah. Well, it's also the numerical value of Yehidah is 37. And that was the age that Isaac was when he was taken to be sacrificed. And part of that what that symbolizes as sacrifice is that Isaac was a pure sacrifice, right? That's part of the idea of being sinless and being united with God, is that there's a purity there. And so that's just one example of that level of the soul being represented in the Torah. But you see many examples of that teaching in Judaism about the purity and the sinlessness of the Yehidah, of that highest level of the soul, which means unity with God. And that's what Yeshua exemplified, being the Messiah, who represents the Yehidah level of the soul, that unity that he had with God. When you have that unity, when you have that connection with God, then even though you could sin does not even tempt you in one little bit, right? And so that's what he exemplified and showed us.
Yep. And the last objection that he brought up, I just want to touch on, kind of bring things back to the video a little bit here. He mentioned the idea of Jesus being God, and said that, if you do believe this, then you're outside of Judaism. But if you don't believe it, then
Of course,
you're in disagreement with his followers. And
which followers?
I know Yeshua's followers, but
That's what he's saying, which followers, because we've talked about the diversity in the church.
Right. And I know that there are, such talking heads as like Michael Brown, who would say that it was already implicit in Jewish belief of the time that the Messiah would be God incarnate. And I just haven't found that to be true in my own experience, but I'd love to know your thoughts on that.
Well, so Yeshua himself said the greatest commandment, Mark 12, is Shema Yisrael, which is Hero Israel, Lord our God, Lord is one. And many places he denies being God or being equal to God, when he says the Father is greater than I, for example, in John. There's many examples. I could pull out many examples, but it's just not. It's not what he taught. By the way, it says in the New Testament that God is not tempted by sin. In James, it says that. And it says in Hebrews that he was tempted in all points as we are, that Yeshua was. So God cannot be tempted in James, but Yeshua was tempted, right, in Hebrews and in the Gospels, right? So that's just one example of many examples where it's contradiction that he could be God. So what we talked about, a few of the things that we've talked about, the virgin birth, being sinless, which granted is something that we only see with Yeshua, that when we talk about the Yehidah, only one person has lived that level of experience, a sinless experience that we say is possible in Judaism, but we just don't see examples of it, right? So when we talk about these things about a righteous man, and not just any righteous man, but the righteous man, the Messiah, and the Messiah is supposed to be the righteous man, right? The greatest example of righteousness, a righteousness and a level higher than Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and Moses. This is what the Midrash says, right, about the Messiah. What the prophet Isaiah talks about his stature, right?
Mm-hmm.
That his stature is a very high stature and level. Now, we compare him to the righteous people in the Bible. Joseph also withstood temptation, right? And so it's not like he's the first person to withstand with temptation. But when we compare him to righteous people, we're saying that these things that applied to the righteous people in the Bible, they also apply to Yeshua, but if anything, on a higher level, right? Which is within Judaism. But we don't cross that line and say that just because he was this level of righteousness, that he is equal to God, that he is God, right?
Right.
The fullness of God, right? But in a body, right? That's not what Judaism believes, not what Judaism teaches. So he was united with God, and what he taught us is that the unity that he had with God, that we can also have that as well, and that we should be conformed to his image, that we should be like him, that we should walk like as he walked, right? So all of that exclusiveness putting on Yeshua is in Judaism idolatry, and it is a problem because you're putting Yeshua on a level that is not possible for us to imitate. Then we can't actually be like him if he's actually God, and we're not, So that's a very important part of it. I'll let you guys go.
I just in listening to you speak, it kind of hit me that the idea that him having this certain level of righteousness that's on a higher level than what we can recognize has existed within humanity for the totality of human existence, but then equating that to being God almost makes an idol out of that level of righteousness in and of itself.
Yes. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and I'd never really thought about that before, but that's very interesting to me.
What I like to say lately is that with Yeshua, we see, what did he say? He said, he quoted Psalms 82, which says, "You are all gods and children of the Most High," in Psalm 82. When they're accusing him of making himself God, that's what they're accusing him of. And so instead of agreeing with the false accusation that he made himself God, what was his response? He said, "You are all God and children of the Most High." You are all gods, if depending on how you want to translate Elohim.
Right.
But it says Atem Elohim. So what Judaism actually teaches, in the I think this is highlighted most in Hasidut, in Hasidic Judaism, but it's that Ein od milvado, which is in the Torah. There is nothing except for God. And Paul says that God may be all in all. And so what is the proper understanding of God is one? Not that God is one, like there's one God, there's one man sitting in the sky, judging everything, right? No, what it means is that he is unity. He is the unity of all that there is, all in all. And there's nothing apart from God. That's what Ein od milvado means. There's nothing apart from him. And so everything is an expression. It comes from God, right? As Paul says, "For from him and through him and to him are all things." That's another very clear statement. So everything comes from God, everything is through God, and everything is in God. In him, we move and live and have our being, right? That's what he says in Acts. So we are all one with God. That's what God is one means. But what I like to say recently is that Yeshua, by his righteousness, despite being tempted, he is divinity revealed. And we, through our sin, we are divinity concealed. And so I think that's a very important, that is a Jewish understanding of the Messiah and of our relationship to God.
Right. Yep. Concealed. I know Tanya speaks at length, right, about the klipot and the hardening, which acts as a concealant, and that's that is active through and in our sin. That's part of Tikkun Olam is elevating the sparks of righteousness through our observance of the commandments.
Yeah.
That's
The
beautiful.
Tanya says that God hides himself with himself. He conceals himself with himself, right? So, yeah, God conceals himself. So God is concealed. And our job is to reveal God and to reveal him through our following his commandments, to following his word. And I'll say this isn't just my idea or my interpretation. This is explicit in the New Testament because it says he is the image of the invisible God, right? And we are created in God's image. So, and it says that he's the firstborn among many brethren in Romans, right? And that we are to be conformed to his image. So what's said about Yeshua is true of us as well, but we are being conformed to that image, the image of God, that we were made in his image, but that image through our sin becomes a blurry image, right?
Right.
It becomes more concealment of God. But when we live in his will and in his commandments, especially, then his image is revealed, and he is revealed to be all in all.
It reminds me of 1 Corinthians 13, but now I see through a glass darkly, but then face to face.
Yes.
I was just thinking
Exactly.
of that myself.
There's another one. This is from Chaya Moharan 299, which says, before the true Zaddik is found in the world, one can approach the blessed name by himself. But once the true Zaddik is found in the world, it is impossible to approach the blessed name truly in any way except by approaching him, the Zaddik. And I have a beautiful discourse on this with the help of the blessed name. And if it is the will of the blessed name to write it, it will be clarified elsewhere.
That's crazy.
The same concept of to approach God the same thing that the rabbi said in the sages, which is like, if you're approaching God or if you want to cleave to God, cleave to a Zaddik. See a Zaddik.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly. Well, that's the danger. And I think that this is part of the answer to Rabbi Morty. Because I think someone could hear that statement and go and be very disturbed by that, right? That it's a thing that a lot of people say in Judaism, we don't have any intermediaries, we don't have anyone between us and God. And there's a truth to that. There's an absolute truth to that. But the problem is, this is another example. No one can see God and live, right? It says in the New Testament, no one has seen God at any time. And John, I think, says no one has seen God at any time, but the Son, I think it says the Son has revealed him or something like that. And it said, and Yeshua says, you have seen me. So you look at the verse that says no one can see God, no one has seen God, and then Yeshua says, you have seen me, right? So it's like, but he also says, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father, right? So how do we reconcile these seemingly contradictory statements, right? But it's exactly what we just talked about, the image of God, right? That he is an image that we can see of God, of godliness revealed, right? Not godliness concealed. But we can't exchange the image for the thing in itself, for God himself. And I think that's a danger we see throughout the Bible. We see that the intermediary to God becomes a replacement for God in a lot of times. And
Right.
For example, I believe it's clear when Moses ascends to the mountain and he doesn't come back when they expect.
I was just about to bring that up.
And
the
they make
golden
an idol.
calf.
Yeah. And they say they make it seem clear that they're not making the idol to replace God. They're making the idol to replace Moses.
Yes.
Who left them, right?
Yep. But the golden calf is the image of.
Yes, exactly. but also you see that Moses was clearly an intermediary between God and the people, and God was pleased that they wanted an intermediary between them, because it showed that they feared God, that they actually respected God's power and his fearfulness, right? So we do need a tzaddik. We do need an intermediary like Moses. But we cannot exchange Moses for the one who Moses is representing, right?
Right. And I think we had a little bit left of that video. I figure I'll bring it up and we'll let Rabbi Morty finish out and see what thoughts we all have on that. Let's see.
Believe that he's the Mashiach. He was not heralded by Eliyahu. He did not show the signs. He did not bring in the exiles. He did not bring peace. He has nothing to prove that he was Mashiach. It's very, very dangerous because, again, he is an idol. He is worshipped as an idol. He's prayed to as an idol. And the Mashiach would not be so. Therefore, keep the Torah and end it at Divrei Hamim. Any questions, let me know.
I think it's interesting. He brings up the Messiah would never be an idol or anything like that. I have to find the source, but there is a correlation between Messiah and the bronze serpent that's raised up and then is turned into an idol. It's something that was originally intended for healing, and then along with the same idea of Joseph, and I think this is in. Where is that guy? Vilna Gaon, in his works, where he talks about a Messiah who's ultimately like rejected and seen as wicked and evil. If you look at Joseph's story, Joseph's brothers are like look at the history, right? You have multiple people throughout his lineage where a brother kind of goes rogue and goes off the derek, off the path of righteousness. So imagine you are one of Joseph's brothers. You don't know the ending of the story. Take out the lullaby effect here, but you don't know the ending of the story. And you have a brother where you're not the oldest. You're just seemingly the favorite of your father. And so you don't have any rights to be king or anything like that. And then you tell all your brothers, hey, I just had a dream. You're all supposed to be worshiping me. And they're like, no. That's that's a sign of a false prophet right here. We can just automatically assume everything that you say is a lie. And then he comes back again. And he's like, not only my brothers, but my mother and my father are also going to worship me. Well, hold on a second. Absolutely not. Okay, now we've got to put you in a pit. We have to do away with you. Like, from the brother's perspective, he is 100% a false Mashiach. He is a bad person. He's trying to turn himself into an idol. He's trying to get worship, and they try to put him away. And then ultimately he ends up ascending to the right hand of the Most High of the land, which is Pharaoh. And then his brothers come back and they're like, oh my gosh, look at this is actually true.
That's an interesting comparison, because I've never actually thought of putting it on the perspective of them, the 11 being the righteous and Joseph being the crazy one. It's always thought as, oh, this is annoying little brother, and they're just the big brother bullies. But that's actually a really cool perspective on the story.
Right. And if you look at like Ishmael, once again, Ishmael is viewed as like this evil son, Esau, an evil son. What happens with all of them? They get sent away. So you have Joseph, who then is like, yeah, mom and dad and all of you are going to bow to me and you're going to worship me. Okay, what do? We send you away. We get rid of you. So the idea that a Mashiach is going to be well liked in his early days, even with like King David being liked as this, in sin my mother conceived me, bastard child kind of an outlook. Like, to say that he's not going to imitate this idea of all of Israel, really, which Messiah is supposed to encapsulate the image of Israel. He's supposed to be Israel. And so Israel likewise was like this bastard child, like this wayward kind of a son who ends up returning. To say that he would never be viewed as an idol or anything else, I think kind of misses the mark of what Mashiach's mission ultimately is, in becoming Israel, but not just Israel, the head of Israel.
Yeah, very good. We talked about Moses, the golden calf, and blaming Moses for the sin of the golden calf seems kind of silly, right? So blaming Yeshua for the golden calf that was, made of him, and the religion, the idolatry that was made from him, seems, I think really, if you really inspect it, you realize that it's absurd, for many of the reasons that we've discussed. But there's another great analogy, and I think there's tons of analogies. But it says, in Ecclesiastes, it says, I, Ecclesiastes, was king of Jerusalem. And the Jewish commentary in the Talmud, it talks about this, that the reason he said that is that because he was actually deposed from his throne. The king of the demons, his name's Ashmedai. There's a story that King Solomon was basically replaced by this king of the demons and pretended to be King Solomon. And King Solomon tried to tell everyone that I'm the actual king, and no one believed him, and they thought that this king of the demons was the actual King Solomon. And so he wandered around like a beggar and said, I Kohelet, I Ecclesiastes, was king over Jerusalem, and no one would believe him. And there's a debate among the rabbis if King Solomon was ever actually recognized to be the truthful king and restored to his throne, because the deception was so powerful that this king of the demons pretended to be Solomon and convinced everyone. And I think that story is really powerful because it very much is analogous to what happened to Yeshua. The King Solomon is the first one who could have been Mashiach, arguably, because he's the son of David. And for him to, according to Judaism, have had this experience where he was someone was completely an imposter and completely usurped his name and his who he was, and totally distorted it and pretended to represent him when it was a false representation. And actually, the way that they say in the story that they recognize that he was not the true King Solomon was because he did not practice the commandments of the Torah, specifically regarding family purity. So it's pretty amazing. That's just one example, but I think we have to see that this was not a surprise on God, that God actually knew that this was going to happen, knew that this idolatry would be made, that this false representation would be made. I actually believe it's spelled out very clearly in the book of Daniel, because Daniel talks about a king who will make himself God, and who will change the law and the times, and the forsake the desire for women, which is analogous to celibacy in the Catholic Church. There's a few hints about the beast, which is Rome, right? And who is Rome, right? Who became the fourth beast that the Messiah will come and destroy. It's the Roman system, right? Which includes Roman Catholicism, which includes the Greco-Roman Christianity that comes out of the same system of believing that this man is a god and changing the law, changing the times, the seasons. This exactly what Daniel prophesied. And it's actually what the apostles also, they all talked about: the Antichrist, the lawless one, the spirit of the Antichrist, the mystery of lawlessness already at work. John said it is the last hour. Paul said, I warned you day and night for 3 years that after I have left, savage wolves will come among you, not sparing the flock. So all the apostles knew, and they said that the prophets warned about this apostasy, what Paul calls the apostasy, and it's centered around this lawless one, this man who became a god. So now the question is that what Yeshua actually taught? Is that what he actually represented, or was he deposed? Was his place usurped by someone who is not him? Someone who claims to be him. And as Paul says, if someone teaches another gospel or another Yeshua than the one that I have taught you, let that man be accursed. So he wasn't playing around, because he knew actually what was happening. And it was happening in his time that another Yeshua was being preached and being represented. And that was not the one that he, as a Pharisee, was believed in and gave his life for.
I think also, one of the things that commonly gets brought up, which Rabbi Morty brought up, is the lack of fulfillment of certain prophecies.
Yes.
Which I would agree. Anybody who reads through the New Testament and the Gospels has to agree, if we're being objective, that there are certain prophecies that were not fulfilled, but those are prophecies that are attributed to Mashiach ben David, right? The Messiah, son of David. And I understand that, maybe not all of Judaism is, unanimous in their belief regarding the distinction between the son of David and the son of Joseph. But I can look into Jewish sources, historically speaking, and find, ubiquitous information about the distinction between the two. And I think personally that the argument could be made that Yeshua serves in the capacity of the son of Joseph.
Yes.
What would your
You mean Yeshua ben
be there?
Yosef? You mean Yeshua ben Yosef?
Right.
He could be ben Yosef.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, Rabbi Moshe David Valley explicitly says this in Sefer Likutim, which is an incredible and very important rabbi who says it. But yeah, there are sources that talk about Mashiach ben Yosef and not being, that we pray that he's not killed, and the Talmud talks about Mashiach ben Yosef being killed, and about Mashiach ben David praying that he would be resurrected. According to, let's see, who's the rabbi? Oh, that's the Chida, who has that interpretation of that passage. But it clearly says Mashiach ben Yosef is killed. So the fact that I think the objection to the certain exactly what you said, there are prophecies that have not yet been fulfilled. That's 100% true. Now, we don't know which role Mashiach ben Yosef fulfills versus Mashiach ben David, except by what the sages tell us. We don't even actually know. We actually don't even know that there is kind of a concept of Mashiach without the sages, anyways, right? So the word Messiah is used very different ways throughout the Bible, for example, right? So we have to follow what the rabbis tell us about the Messiah, and then understanding that there's actually two different Messiahs. So what we can say about Yeshua is that he was killed, like Mashiach ben Yosef. We can say that he was resurrected, which is something that the sages say about Mashiach ben Yosef, that's something that can be applied to him. There are sources in the sages that talk about the Talmud says that the Messiah ascends alive to heaven, just like Enoch and Elijah. And the Talmud says that this happened during the time of the destruction of the second temple. Sorry. So all of these things we can apply to Yeshua. Now the question is that as Mashiach ben Yosef, or is that as Mashiach ben David? Is there one Messiah? Is there two Messiahs? Right. So there's contradictory sources. There's differences of opinion, and the Rambam talks about this, and he says we don't actually know how it's going to look like until it actually happens.
Right. See, I'm glad you brought that up because I have had conversations with Jewish friends who they've brought up the objection that that Mashiach ben Yosef and Mashiach ben David they couldn't be the same person, that it's impossible that they could be the same person. But I can even find in rabbinic sources, now they may be a minority. They may be the minority position, but I can find in rabbinic sources where there even is theorizing that they would be the same person.
Yeah, no, there are sources. I think it's very interesting. It's interesting because the Rambam, who really, when you're talking brass tacks, Rambam is very important because he's the only halakhic authority that talks about Mashiach. So, all the other sources, no matter how great and important they are, when it comes to halakha, this is like how, like, unity. This is how we like walk our lives and live our lives in unity with each other, right? And a lot of halakhic sources don't want to talk about Mashiach because that's really more in the realm of belief. What do you believe about? It doesn't really affect your life and how you live, right?
Right.
But the Rambam,
Unless it's Yeshua.
yeah, yeah,
If you have an opinion on Yeshua, then it doesn't matter anything else. It's no longer an opinion or a belief. It's now somehow dictating every aspect of your life.
yeah. Which, as you know, is justified because, unfortunately, his name has been used to justify a lot of nonsense, right? A lot of anti-Judaism, anti-Torah, right? So obviously that's not what we're saying here. But when the Rambam doesn't mention Messiah, son of Joseph, at all. He doesn't mention that phrase, that name. He talks about the Messiah, who seems to be one Messiah, who is a descendant of King David. So that would presumably be Mashiach ben David, right? So basically, I think a lot of people hold a Rambam-dominated perspective for good reason, because it's based on halakhic perspective.
To add to that just a little bit, Zohar
please.
3:173b also indicates that the Messiah would be the son of Nathan. However, only through the mother, and it has to deal with a line. I can't remember where that line's found, but that reference should have it. But ultimately indicating that it's through Yibam, so the legal line versus the biological line. So he's from Solomon, and since Nathan didn't have any children, Nathan's wife ends up marrying Solomon, and Solomon ends up having a child. That child then belongs to Nathan under Torah law and also to Solomon. And so it's born through Solomon, but belonging to Nathan. So it's a legal and biological line belonging to both of them, which Jesus has if you look at it from Luke, Matthew's perspective.
It's pretty crazy that very seemingly obscure source in Zohar that says all of a sudden that the Messiah is the son of Nathan, not the son of Solomon, the son of David. And it turns out that Yeshua, that the other genealogy besides Solomon, who even the Rambam himself says he has to be a descendant of King Solomon. He fulfills both of those, which is, I don't think, is a coincidence. I don't think, and people who think that the Zohar is like, much later, written much later. I don't know of any other sources that say that the Messiah has to be a descendant of Nathan. But anyways, it's pretty incredible. He fulfills both of those. So, but anyways, from David, right, through the line of David. And so Messiah, son of Joseph, is just seen as basically superfluous, like not necessary, even though the Talmud talks about Messiah, son of David, or son of Joseph. The Zohar talks about Messiah, son of Joseph. So when you really look at it, it seems very strange to just rule out the possibility of Messiah, son of Joseph. It doesn't seem faithful to all the many Jewish sources, authoritative Jewish sources that talk about him. So one of the more interesting opinions I've heard, and I learned this from Rabbi Reuven Wolf, which he's a fun guy to listen to. He's a Meshiachist, so he believes that the Rebbe is the Mashiach. But he brings out these fun sources that are really interesting to see. And I forget exactly the source that he quotes. I'm really sad to say. I want to say it's the Shalah, Shalah HaKadosh. But I think he brings him, who said that if Israel is worthy, then the two messiahs will be one. And if Israel's not worthy, they'll be split. That's a really interesting theory. And again, it's just one of many different theories about how we reconcile Messiah, son of Joseph, Messiah, son of David. So the bottom line is that we don't know until it is fulfilled. And that's what how the Rambam basically ends. Any of these sources that talk about. So now the question is, who fulfills the most sources that we have available to us? And who can reconcile the most Jewish sources, right? And who has already fulfilled any of those? So when we talk about the Messiah coming during the time of the destruction of the second temple, being killed, being resurrected, and ascending alive to heaven, which are all based in the Talmud, all those four things, and it already happened, I think that builds a very strong case for Yeshua as at least Mashiach ben Yosef, because we know that Mashiach ben Yosef was killed. So
right. So there's also if you look at Rashi's commentary on the wars of Gog and Magog, he mentions that there's multiple different battles that are essentially happening during this time. I think he mentions 4 of them. A lot of his commentary and Ezekiel talk about it, but also hinting that even the one where like Mashiach is killed it could be considered a spiritual battle rather than a physical battle. He doesn't actually have to go to war in the sense of So anyway, so that's Rashi's commentary on Gog and Magog, which the Mashiach ben Yosef is supposed to die in a battle with Gog and Magog. So you also have that aspect in it, being the Second Temple period is that war, and it's a spiritual war, and Jesus dies in the spiritual war. Here's just a logical question here.
Sure.
Can we claim that someone is Mashiach prior to a full 1,000 years of peace occurring?
Okay, so the Rambam actually, I want to actually I want to establish the Rambam. I don't know how else to say it. I want to uphold what he wrote, because I think it is very important. I think it is halakhic. So it is authoritative, even though I don't think that it's the only. It's not the only halakhic authority. So, and it's not even really binding as far as I understand.
Oh,
Rapture just
there he
happened.
is.
Okay.
There he is.
Did I?
You blipped out for a minute.
Oh, sorry.
Austin thought you got
sorry
raptured
about
and we
that.
were left behind.
Yep.
That's funny. That's hilarious. What did I say?
So you were saying that you were trying to prop up the Rambam.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yeah, I think the Rambam is extremely wise and halakhic, So I think, and he actually explains how we handle all the other sources that talk about Mashiach. Okay. So since he is an extremely important authority, I think we should actually fall back on him as much as we can. Okay. So he talks about that the Mashiach, that someone who fulfills certain things can be considered as what he calls bechezchat Mashiach, the strength or the potential Mashiach, right?
Yes.
You guys have seen this expression?
Yes.
And what are the things that he says? Very simple. And he even uses an example. He says Rabbi Akiva thought that Bar Kokhba was Mashiach. Now, what's crazy about that is that Bar Kokhba didn't do a lot of the things that Mashiach, even according to Rambam, was supposed to do. I don't know if he really did anything other than led a revolt, fought wars. But the Rambam says that in order to consider someone to be a potential Mashiach, they have to teach Torah. But I'll just shortly summarize it, right? Teach the oral and the written Torah. Okay. They have to be a descendant of King David. Okay. That's important. That's how he starts. And then I think the only other thing he mentions, I should actually pull it up, but I don't have it on me right now, is fights the wars of God. Okay. He says if someone fulfills those things, then we can consider him as a potential Mashiach, according to Halakha. Okay. So the question is, did Yeshua do those things? Okay.
Right.
Did he teach the oral and the written Torah? Yes, I think clearly he did.
Yes.
Rabbi Yaakov Emden is another halakhic authority who says he did. And fight the wars of God. Oh, descendant of King David. Yeah, that's obvious. Fight the wars of God. So did Yeshua fight wars of God? Now that's a very important question. And actually, Rabbi Moshe David Valley, who says he's Mashiach, the seeker of Mashiach ben Yosef, says how we know he's Mashiach ben Yosef is because he said, I did not come to bring peace to the world, but a sword. He says this is the role of Mashiach ben Yosef, to bring a sword to the world, not to bring peace. And Yeshua says that I will fight, in Revelation he says, I will fight them with the sword of my mouth. And the symbolism of the sword of the mouth, right, being a weapon. And this is exactly in fulfillment of what Isaiah says about the Messiah, that he will slay the wicked with his mouth, with the breath of his mouth, right? It talks about how with his mouth he will slay and kill the wicked, right? So I'm just quoting you Orthodox Jewish sources that say that he fulfilled three things that allow us to consider him to be Mashiach. Potential Mashiach, okay?
Potential Mashiach, yeah.
Yes. Now, this is where we have to approach the next phase, the next step that the Rambam gives, which is how we can know for sure that someone is Mashiach, he uses the word bevadai Mashiach, with certainty Mashiach, right? By the way, in Gematria, bevadai HaMashiach, certainly the Mashiach, is the Gematria of Yeshua. I think that's pretty incredible from Ariel Cohen-Aloro. But, okay, what are the prerequisites that he gives us? Gather the exile. He has to gather the exile. He has to rebuild the temple. And then basically, I'm trying to remember if it says explicitly bring peace to the world. No, I don't think it says explicitly bring peace to the world, but basically defeat the enemies. So that's kind of obvious that there'll be peace in the world.
You actually, the quote you put was, he will rectify the entire world, motivating all the nations to serve God together.
Yes, exactly. So that's the last one. The last one is, he says, the last part of how we know for sure that he's the Mashiach is if he causes the world to be rectified and serve God together with one accord. And what's amazing is shortly after that, what he says there, he actually uses the exact same words to describe Yeshua. He says, all the deeds of Yeshua of Nazareth. So I'm kind of skipping some sections here, but he talks about Yeshua, and he says that basically he makes it sound like Yeshua failed. Okay, so it's really interesting because on one hand, I just said that he gives us all of the prerequisites that we can say we can apply to Yeshua. Now, I'm going to get back to that in just a second, but he says that he uses the exact same words about what the Mashiach, the for sure Mashiach will do, and he uses the same words to apply to what happened through Yeshua, that the whole world was caused to be rectified, and that all the world through Yeshua, through the acts of Yeshua, through what happened through Yeshua, that the whole world is caused to be serve God with one accord. Like, this is part of the process of that happening. So it's pretty amazing, because I think there's a very strong case to make that if he uses that expression to talk about Yeshua and how God says the thoughts of God, we just can't understand God's thoughts, because he says that through Christianity, the opposite of what the Messiah did or was supposed to do happened, right? Christianity caused the Jews to be persecuted, to be scattered, not to be ingathered, and not the temple not to be rebuilt, and
So
them not to prosper, right? So yeah.
On this, I think that, and kind of the point of bringing up like the 1,000 years of peace and all that, is pointing out that one can start the process of all these things, like bringing Torah to the entire world, right? The reason why the printing press was invented, and the reason why we have the Torah, mind you, it's a Christianized version of it, but the Torah being sent into every single part of the world in every single language is only because of Jesus. It's the printing press was invented specifically to send out the full Bible with Torah to the whole world.
Yes.
Monotheism in the world, Christianity and Islam, those are like the widespread religions that are taking over globally. And Christianity, according to a 2014 study by the Barna Group, only 56 believe in a Trinity to begin with. So you have this idea of monotheism, and which is a huge sign of the Messiah of Joseph bringing monotheism to the world. All of it is under the name of Jesus, and there is no other person or any other figure or anything that you can pinpoint to saying, hey, we brought the world out of polytheism and into a monotheism, at least the starting process of that, whether it's Trinitarian, binitarian, modalism, whatever. You have a large group of Christianity and Islam, which make up the majority of the world's religion, and very, very few believe in some sort of polytheistic belief. As far as gathering in all the exile, before you gather in all the exile, you have to first have an exile so that they can be brought back, because there's a descent for a greater ascent. And what greater ascent than the ultimate redemption? And so you have to have the ultimate descent, which is Rome. It's the great deep. And then the resurrection of the dead. In order for that to happen, there has to be a starting point. What's the starting point? The first fruit from the dead, the first resurrection from the dead. So if you look at the process of redemption being the final redemption, the final thing at the very end, you have Yeshua fulfilling all of the starting processes for the final redemption, because the Messiah of David is ultimately going to complete it, but the Messiah of Joseph is the one who starts all of it. And so in a halakhic question, if Lazarus this ties in, we're just going to go on a little Talmud rant here, but if Lazarus takes a Nazirite vow and then died and was resurrected, is he still liable to finish the Nazirite vow?
No. I thought no, but I could be wrong. I don't remember.
So I would say that he is, but only because a certain amount of time has not spanned. I think it's 30 days or something that the spirit still lingers. I could be wrong, but so up until that time where the spirit has actually fully departed, that then it would be considered, because like Lazarus could be married and then he dies and is resurrected. We lost him. But if he dies and is resurrected, then is he still married, or does he have to remarry his spouse? Is he not allowed near his spouse? And if he's a priest, is he allowed to marry her because now she's a widow? Right? Or like, what's her status? So the resurrection actually doesn't end a man's life. It actually, there's like an amendment here because the spirit hasn't left for more than 30 days. So if someone has a heart stop
Just to be that guy. So if he's dead for 30 days and then is resurrected,
So then there would be more of a problem. Because I think that at that point, she would be considered a widow and she would be forbidden to him if he's a high priest. However, for the same reason that like people will say, oh, he can't be Messiah because he didn't accomplish all these things in his lifetime, except that his death and resurrection occurred. Ultimately, it doesn't mean that his death is essentially nullified by the resurrection. Is what's happening.
Interesting.
But even if you were to further that, you could even lean on the argument of some rabbis who actually believe Moses will be Mashiach. And I think there's a couple sages that actually said, Moses will return and become Mashiach. So now we're not even talking about the Spirit lingering. We're talking about thousands of years after.
Yeah. Well, it couldn't be Moses himself because he was a Levite, and so that's why they say that the soul of Moses in the body of a descendant of King David. But anyways, I wanted to answer or what you just said right now about the him being killed. Now the Rambam says that if a Messiah is killed, if a potential Messiah is killed, then he can't be the Messiah. And I think that's exactly the place where he goes into his discussion about Yeshua, because he says that Yeshua was killed. And so the whole crux of his argument, it turns on what was Yeshua resurrected or not, right? Because if he was resurrected, then he's not. You can't consider him killed, right? You can't consider him dead, because of course, if someone's dead, then they can't fulfill the role, right? But if they're resurrected, then you can't consider them dead, and even more so if they ascend alive to heaven, which is what we believe about him, and what the Talmud says about the Mashiach, that the Mashiach will ascend alive to heaven. So this is just further proof that we can't say that according to Rambam Yeshua was killed and he's dead, and that now we can say that he's disqualified according to the Rambam, because that would be to deny that a resurrection happened, which is also denying that Mashiach ben Yosef could be resurrected. It's also denying that Mashiach can ascend alive to heaven, which is what the Talmud says. So there's a lot of things here where we can say that according to the Rambam, I just wanted to kind of tie up about the Rambam, how we can say that, and then I'll just finish with these 2 points, that the ingathering of the exiles, Yeshua said, I was only sent to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. And the high priest, Caiaphas, he says, he prophesies actually that Yeshua has to die so that he might gather in one all the children of God that are scattered abroad. This is the words that's used in John. Okay, so we see a few places where it talks about Yeshua being a part of the process of the ingathering of the exiles, and that was his stated intention and his stated goal, and the high priest's prophecy about him. So that's even though we don't see a full fulfillment of that, we see a partial fulfillment and an intended final fulfillment of that. And then as far as the rebuilding of the temple, my own little interpretation, which I don't think is very popular, is that Yeshua says that on the third day he says, destroy this temple, and the third day I will raise it up. So if we want to say that after 2,000 years, which 1,000 years is as a day, and after 2,000 years, after 2 days, and on the third day, we're entering into the third day from the time of the destruction, we're saying that the temple can be built now and hasn't been built yet, then there's a possible double fulfillment. We talk about how the temple, that the Messiah's body is like the temple, right? So the third day could be referring to his body, which we know it for sure was referring to his body, but it could also be a reference to the temple. And I think that there's a very strong reason to think that that's what he was talking about, because in Hosea it says, after 2 days he will raise us up, and the third day we will live, right? It's I forget the exact phrasing, but it talks about on the third day being resurrected. And we see that's also what happened with the Jewish people returning to the land of Israel. And we see that the land of Israel, or the people of Israel, are like the body of Messiah and the temple all together. They're all analogous. They're all synonymous in unity, right? That what happens to one happens to the other. So if the body's Messiah, or sorry, the Messiah's body was resurrected on the third day, then we can expect to see a resurrection of the nation of Israel after 2,000 years, right? 2 days, and also a rebuilding of the temple. And I think that Yeshua says, "I will raise the temple." And then there's also other sources that say that the temple will descend from heaven, built already. It's built without human hands.
Yep.
So is it possible that the temple I think there's actually a few places in the New Testament that suggest that Yeshua built the heavenly temple, right? And that this could possibly be something that does descend, as the Zohar states, could descend when he descends with him. And that somehow also that could be in unity with us building the temple below and it descending from above, and there being some sort of unity between what's above and below. So that's a little more speculative, but I think when he says, "I will raise up the temple that's destroyed," and he's standing there in the temple, and he's looking at the temple when he's saying this, I don't think it's just only about his body. I think it can also be about the temple. And I think that yeah. So we can see that he did not fulfill those two things, but he fulfilled all the other things. So I do believe that according to the Rambam, if we're just going to follow the Rambam, which I'm not saying that everyone has to follow only the Rambam. He's an authority, but he's not the authority to say that you must only do what Rambam says. Now, he's the most authoritative source on the Mashiach. So if we're going to follow him and be objective, we can say that he's the strongest candidate to be Mashiach, but we do not know yet for sure until he fulfills everything that Mashiach has to fulfill, until he fulfills all the prophecies. So we believe in him, but we don't know, right? So it's a little bit of I think it's a humble place. It's a humble position to take, and it's an honest position to take, because you say, well, I'm not called to know without any uncertainty that he is the Mashiach, but I do believe he is, and I believe that based on so many things, on so many sources, so many prophecies that were fulfilled, so many sources that were fulfilled, and according to the Rambam, that we can consider him potentially Mashiach, and he's the best candidate. And there's little doubt, right? You can have little doubt without having knowledge that you use to beat someone over the head with. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Kind of one of those things where it's like, we can't really know for sure, but the evidence suggests most strongly in this direction.
Yeah.
Yes. And in a court, it would be decided that this, there's certain decisions in life that you may not have the 100% of the information.
Right.
So you have to have some humility that there's some unknowns, right? But if the vast majority of evidence is pointing a direction, then that's enough for a court to make a legal decision, right? So it's enough for us to live our lives by. It's enough for us to get, to sacrifice for, and to, fully believe in it without knowing it. And that's a subtle difference, but I think it's an important difference.
Absolutely.
So I did find something interesting. So, and I might have this incorrect. Goses, which is essentially it's the period of time in which you're obligated still to fulfill a vow. So like if you're married and you end up dying, there's a period of time which is exactly 3 days, 72 hours, that you are still obligated as long as you resurrect within the 72 hours. You are still considered part of living your life. So you can have which yeah, so
Right.
if you're married and then you go unresponsive and you are dead for 71 hours, yeah, and then you
And
come
59
back,
minutes.
you're still married to your wife. But if you go over 72 hours, if you go 73 or 74,
Yeah.
you are no longer married. So under that particular halakhic ruling, technically Jesus didn't actually fully cross over into being considered dead. He was
But
only,
Lazarus did.
but like Princess Bride, he's only
that's-
mostly dead, right?
Oh, that's interesting. Huh? Which
He's
what's
been mostly
the
dead all day.
reference for that?
Let me find it.
That's a really interesting idea. I never thought about.
Absolutely.
Well, again, that just further evidence that we can't disqualify him as a potential Mashiach because of being killed, right? Because he
Right.
didn't stay dead, and maybe he wasn't even halakhically dead, right? So that's really interesting.
Yeah, I'll put it in the chat here. Just a second.
Yeah, toss that in the chat. To say we don't really have any more of the video to go over. I definitely thank all of you gentlemen for being here for this. We're almost at 2 hours now, so I don't want to take too much of everybody else's time. I figure this is a good place to close out.
Here's the exact quote, real quick. For one who is informed, we saw your relative in a dying condition 3 days ago. Thus, he is bound to mourn for him. For it is certain after 3 days that he has officially died. You have to wait 3 days. So, yeah. Anyways, that's the.
Well, we know it wasn't full 3 days. We know it wasn't a full 3 days. It was, from Friday to Sunday. So, very nice. I don't know if I know we probably took some tangents there, but we finished the video, right?
Yes, video's all done.
So maybe we can each share a little takeaway, like in a response to the video.
Sure.
I would say that again, rather than spitting on anyone's face, I truly mourn with tears the abomination that's been done to Yeshua's name and to the representation of him. And I believe we need to make a absolutely clear separation between who he was and what became of the religions that were developed after him. Now, I've been using this analogy recently as well, that just as we say that the Christians took a Jewish Messiah as their own, right? I don't like to talk about people. I like to talk about the religion as a system, as an ideology, because I believe people are mostly ignorant and don't know. They forgive them, Father, for they do not know what they do. Right? That's what Yeshua says. But Christianity took a Jewish Messiah and just absolutely distorted the message and the truth of who he was, as history bears out. Now, at the same time, they took the Jewish Bible and they claimed the Jewish Bible for themselves at the exact same time. So if we're going to say that Yeshua is responsible for all the sin and all the violence and all the murder, then I think logically we have to say that the Hebrew Bible is also responsible for all the slavery and all the murder and all the horrible things that have been done in the name of the Bible. It's the same thing.
Right.
And when we look at the scriptures, and when we study the scriptures, and when we look at the life of Yeshua and we study his life and his teachings, we see that nothing nothing could be further from the truth.
Right. So kind of like the same way that we would say, well, the Bible's not actually responsible for all of these atrocities, because that was people who were misunderstanding the Bible. We would also have to say, well, no, Jesus is not responsible for that. That was people misunderstanding Jesus.
Exactly.
Yeah, a modern.
And when
this is a little more of an American example, but to say, well, Trump is not responsible for Project 2025. Those are extreme far right Republicans who don't speak for Trump, but they follow Trump because they think Trump will do what they want.
Right.
He has not said, I'm for this. Now, I have not read the document. I haven't gone into any of that. That's
Me neither.
an example of a few things that I've seen, because I've also seen Trump say, I haven't read the document. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I think that's kind of an example, is this one group of followers, though that's not every person that supports Trump or voted for Trump, or maybe those who are on the fence. That's this one group of people that follow him.
Right.
And they may be the loudest group, but they don't equal what he stands for, as far as most of us know.
Right. And all the more so in like we talked about at the beginning, when most of human history, most people, like by far most people, like the vast amount of people, were not literate and could not read, and could not even read the scriptures to know the difference between what the Roman bishop is telling them, priest is telling them, verse in Latin and only in Latin, or whatever it was. So there's a less of accountability there that we have to take into consideration, and that's we have to be part of the change. Now that we are literate, now that we are educated, now that we are in the age of information, right? We have a responsibility to not be the hypocrites that we see history full of.
Yep. I think my response would be, again, to dignify the concerns regarding Christian history, those are valid objections. Those are, that happened in Jewish history, that they were so persecuted by Christianity, but maybe try and specify the difference between Christianity and the narrative of the New Testament, because those are two different things. And
well, it's the following the majority, right? Like if you say Judaism is Reform Judaism, just because that's the popular, like that's the most widely spread form of Judaism is Reform. Reform doesn't actually reflect what Torah is.
Right.
Like
I would also, just acknowledge that these objections do come from a place of hurt. I do fully acknowledge and respect that they do come from a place of hurt, but I think it's worth noting, even among psychologists, right, that there's such a thing as a trauma response, right? Where for people who have been severely abused, they do have what's called a trauma response. It's the knee-jerk reaction. But those can sometimes be harmful to the self or to others. And psychologists pretty unanimously agree those are not good, and you need to grow beyond those, right? In order to better yourself, your relationship with those around you, and just the overall betterment of your life, you do have to grow beyond your trauma response. So I acknowledge it comes from a place of hurt, and that it is you could say, a form of a religious trauma response among the Jewish people. I think it does need to be acknowledged that this is a conversation that could be had on a rational level to maybe help grow beyond the trauma response.
And that it's legitimate.
Right.
We're not trying to say those things didn't happen or to justify them.
No, not at all. Not at all.
Yeah. And man. Yeah. What do you think, Jeremiah?
As the student, and then the person, probably the least knowledgeable here on a lot of this, I think, again, I would echo what Brad said about that. One, we're not going to wish those things aside or whisk them aside, probably is better. I would wish them aside. I would wish that they didn't happen. But acknowledge that this is absolutely real. And then I would probably go more the apologetic route of just asking questions and saying, okay, what do you see in the New Testament? You made the claim that the New Testament speaks against Torah and against halakha. Well, where? And just learn more of that position, simply because I do not in any way feel equipped to handle here's a response to your complaint. I'm not there yet. I'll refer them back to Brad and Austin, or to you. And then I would just say, there's a book called Tactics, and they say two questions. What do you mean by that? And how did you come to that conclusion? So, that would be my approach. Is I'm going to learn as much as I can about what you believe, not Christianity teaches. What specifics with the writings in the New Testament do you believe speak against halakha and Torah? And I think that would just be my response, because I think for me especially, the need to listen and to learn is there. And then that just shows that, well, there are Christians that are willing to listen and to hear.
Yeah, definitely.
Austin?
I don't know. I came in late, so I just kind of.
He's here.
Yeah, I've got a ton of stuff on like virgin birth stuff and things. I only watched the one ending piece of that video for the review here. So yeah, I don't have too much else to say.
I gotcha.
But
I will say again, and I said this backstage. I don't know if I said it opening up, but I do like Rabbi Morty, and I always get the sense from him in his videos that he genuinely cares about people, and I appreciate that about him, and I think that that's something that, especially any Christians who may get offended by the content of his videos, like, just understand he really does care, though, right? And at least give him that grace.
Yeah, I think what you said at the beginning is exactly the right thing, is that he's actually correct about Christianity as a man-made religion, but he's not right to attribute that to Yeshua. And I think that's just the bottom line, really. So.
That's a common thing, though. Like, I mean, you're looking at a doctrine from the lens of the people who push the doctrine, right? Like, if I want to know about what the Torah says and I want to criticize the Torah, I go to Jewish people to then ask about Torah. If I want to criticize the Quran, you would ask and learn from Muslims, like what the Quran actually says. And so I think that from his side, he's doing due diligence. He's asking Christianity and finding, what do you actually believe about this text, and what does this text say? I don't have the permissions to tell you what it says, so I'm going to ask you. It's just there is the only fault there is that actually a representation of what that text says, being that it's a majority, which is the same thing that we have. If I were to ask Judaism but about Torah, but I only went to the most popular group, being
good point.
I'm going to have Moses was probably not real. God is kind of iffy. Maybe he does, maybe he doesn't exist, and also all the laws are kind of arbitrary, right? Like, you're going to have
actually talk.
Yeah, right. You're going to have completely different theology and takeaways than what the Torah actually says, and it's not because you, like, in a way, you went to the wrong people, but it's because those are the people that have the text, and you went to the majority view. And so do your due diligence and find, that view. But I think it's good to know what are the other perspectives, what are the other views, and why do they hold to those views? Because if you separate it from its historical context, then, like, you should be reading it as Jewish literature, being that it was Jewish people who wrote it, and then go from that position to try to understand it. But yeah, from a purely Christian perspective, he hits the nail on the head. Yeah.
Well, and to your point, we have a long list of and growing list of rabbis, Orthodox rabbis, who say that they've read the New Testament and they say, this is all Jewish stuff here. This is, Yeshua was one of us, Yeah. And so
Yeah.
So it is possible to read it that way, and it just shows when someone attributes, like you said, the Christian representation to Yeshua, then they, and they haven't actually studied the Yeshua, then they're making a mistake. They're making a judgment, error in judgment, which is has big consequences, and I think we're trying to change the tide on that.
There's a lot of issues with that, even with the like translations. If you pick up a translation, you're going to walk away with way different theology, and because it's not commonly translated to Hebrew, and most people don't speak Greek, you're just reading the Christian understanding of these scriptures. You're like, obviously he claimed to be a Trinity, and he claimed to do away with laws, and that Torah was evil and traditions are bad. Like
every translation is an interpretation.
Right.
Yep. And for the New Testament, a lot of it kind of goes back to, I've said this pretty frequently, just the problem that both modern Christianity and a lot of modern Judaism refuse to acknowledge the New Testament as a Jewish document.
Yes. Yeah.
Like on both sides.
Yeah. It's true. Yeah. It's true. No, and there are important things to know, like how, because the New Testament was held in Christian hands and was excluded from Judaism, right? For centuries, for millennia. For that reason, there have been things that have been tampered with. There are translations, especially. I think the translations are the worst, but there are a few even verses like the Johannine comma, for example, the only place where it says the Father, the Spirit, and the Son are one, right? Like the only place the Trinity is clearly expressed, that actually was never in the original book of John, right? But that was added later. So there are certain things that you have to understand, like even the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit maybe wasn't at the end of the book of Matthew, according to the Hebrew copies of it. So, and also according to the church fathers who quote that verse, and they don't say Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. They say baptized in the name of the Son. so there's really important. It's important to understand the textual criticism aspect of the New Testament, because you realize that there are some things that were tampered that make it lend itself to Christian doctrine, but the fact that it has so much Jewishness still left,
right,
and that it's just everywhere you look, you can't escape it, and they haven't been able to remove that. And like Bart Ehrman, as a great scholar, he says, I think one of his method, I don't know if it's his method, but I think it's one of the most genius things. Basically, he says, if anything in the New Testament seems to contradict Christian doctrine, then you can have the most certainty that is actually what was originally there, because they wouldn't have added that later to contradict Christianity. So all the things, and there's many things that confirm Judaism, that confirm the Pharisees, that confirm Torah, that confirm, right? All of those things are the most, we can be certain, are the most authentic, and you can't escape it if you just take a cursory look of the New Testament. So anyways, that's a whole other can of worms. Yeah.
It's my father has said frequently that all of the things that Christianity got right are things they borrowed from Judaism, and everything else that they got wrong they borrowed from paganism.
So Martin Buber almost said exactly that. Martin Buber was a very, very famous philosopher, a Jewish philosopher, and he said almost exactly those words. Everything. What did he say? Try to remember. I had the quote down pretty good before, but almost exactly those words. Yep. Anything that's true within Christianity is from Judaism, and anything that's false was added later and was not, was pagan. So
right. And even Origen, Origen, one of the church fathers, admits essentially that everyone who translated over, or everyone that relayed the New Testament writings that they did not pass them on the same way that they had received them. Right.
Wow.
So there's
Well,
essentially
telephone.
admission that there was some level of tampering.
Origin says that?
Yes. Yeah, I can
Wow.
I can find you the exact quote because I've got it in. Actually, it if you do have our book, it
I have,
is
yeah.
probably something that is quoted towards the end. I've got a 4-part series on the history of Christmas that I'm pretty sure that I utilized that quote in
Oh
that
man,
series.
so that means I have to read to the end.
I mean, you can skip ahead.
4 articles.
I'm just joking.
You
No,
can
that's
skip
great. I'm
ahead.
looking forward to it. I'm working my way through it. I don't want to rush it. That's great. I look forward to reading that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Anyway, other than that, gentlemen, I greatly have enjoyed this discussion, and I appreciate all of you making time to be here. Especially you, Isaac. Thank you so much for making time in your schedule for us.
Let's do it again.
Absolutely,
For sure.
absolutely. And for the rest, I think stick around because we'll probably still end up talking backstage. But other than that, gentlemen, I hope that you all have wonderful days. I hope everybody who has seen this has been blessed by it, has learned from it, and maybe learned a new way to approach this conversation when you do hear these objections.
Yeah.
And with that said, hit the like and subscribe button. Come back and see us sometime.
Press the like button and believe in the subscribe button.
Yeah, there we go. That's because Seamus wasn't here. So, all right, everyone. Have a wonderful day.
Take care.